Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Simply Trade and News Roundup. I'm your host, Annik, and today's conversation is going to make a lot of importers sit up a little straighter, which reminded me I need to sit up straight because I start to pinch my back sometimes, and that's not what we want to do. We always want to sit straight, right? Okay, so we're talking about ACE today, the Automated Commercial Environment. Yes, it is the same system that tracks every tariff, HTS code, and entry you've ever filed. But what if I told you it's not just compliance reporting? It's really untapped business intelligence. And so what better way to, discuss this than with a trade expert? So joining me today is Michelle Frennier, a trade nerd in the best possible way. And trade nerds, I'm going to have to link Amy Morgan to that because she came up with that term and it's a great little segue. Anywho, so Michelle has spent years of helping companies turn their ACE data really into real insights. And she's kind of discussing with us what ACE can do for you and how you can do it. And what if you don't use it, And she has a very smart way of looking at ACE. And we had a prior conversation on this and I loved it. So I'm excited to have more of a discussion with Michelle, and I'm hoping that you are enjoying this conversation too. So thank you so much for being here, Michelle. And I'm so glad that you could make it on the podcast one more time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I always enjoy coming on and sharing good stuff. So Ace is full of it for sure.
I have not much talked about it on the podcast, and it's been something that has been mentioned in different rooms and questioned, I would say. And so I kind of want to understand ACE in a better way. So let's start with the lowest of lows. Why do we use ACE, and should everyone be using ACE?
Yeah, great question. First off, everyone should use ACE. If you don't have an ACE account and you are importer of record or exporting anything, you should absolutely have an ACE account. It's free. The government issues it to you. There may be a bit of a backlog right now, but it's worth it to get an application and very simple to do. And it's easy, free, all the things. The other thing that ACE is that's sort of underrated is it's a story that customs tells about your business. So if you think about every bit of trade data that's ever been transmitted under your name and your importer number or your exporter as USPPI, that story is embedded in the data that's collected through the system. Not only is it good for companies to be able to monitor their own data, but it also helps look at nuances and changes and things that sort of pique the interest of the government officials, which is really what you want, right? You want to know ahead of time what might not look quite right for your business. So, yeah, I think ACE is something that's a no brainer. It's a first step. It's a first step
Yeah.
for everybody trying to look at their trade compliance and get better, tune it up, look for things that they should be paying attention to.
It seems powerful. And do you ever find executive underestimating how much story their trade data actually tells?
Oh, yes. I think we all try to give a presentation that's good for the C-suite so that those folks can really understand impacts to the business. And they like it simple, right? They want to see things until you pivot an ACE report and they're like, what is that? I'm like, well, so good you asked.
Yeah.
That right there is your duty spend per supplier that you're bringing in. That's how much money is going out the door. What is that? That's the number of errors that have been submitted by your broker that have been done under post summary correction. That's your scorecard, so to speak, with customs. How well are you, managing the data that you're providing in ACE and through your entry summaries via your broker, et cetera. So it can get really dicey. It can be really powerful too. The minute they see that data, they're like, wait a minute, what else can you show me? How is this happening? What could we do? Oh, tariffs are changing. What if we went here? What would that look like? So they're going to see their own data and then immediately start thinking, wow, what other opportunities could we have to save money and, weather some of the tariff fodder that's happening. Whether ACE can do that for them or not, questionable, but certainly it tells the current story and helps identify areas for improvement for sure.
It's like going to your annual checkup and
Yeah.
realizing, "Whoa, what? I'm low on iron? That's why I've
Yeah.
been feeling like that? Okay. Well, I should have done that a little bit sooner because I've been living 3 months with, I don't know, being lazy and it being so tired all the time, and this could have been fixed by just taking some iron pills." So, let's see why ACE matters. For someone who's never really opened those ACE accounts or reports, beyond their compliance checks, what's actually inside an ACE account?
Yeah. Everything, which is kind of
Right.
a funny thing to say, but so a lot of areas that you might wanna look at within ACE have to do with sort of the health, as you mentioned, of your company and your compliance. First off, it carries all of the information about whether or not you've been requested to submit information to the government. So one thing that gets kind of swept away is if you get a notice from customs, CF-28, notice for information. That one's a big one these days because it's your first indication that your account is being looked at, that your importer of record is being picked at by customs. And sometimes those go across the desk of someone who doesn't realize what they are and they get sloughed aside, but there's a time limit they have to be replied by. So you can run reports out of ACE that tell you if anything like that's been issued, when, by, when it's due. Those are important things to know. So right off the bat, you have a report that does that. It's also going to show you all of your associated accounts that you have tied to it, along with their bonds, bond sufficiency, and taking a look at what do you have in the system, right, for bond coverage. That's all going to be part of it. You're going to also be able to see the data elements that are captured that might help identify errors. You might be able to see patterns that otherwise don't really stand out to you. But when you run a report and you actually have a show you, you can tell, wow, look at that. I have this many transactions from a company I don't even recognize. Well, that could be just a simple mid error. So we're hoping this global business identifier nixes this mid stuff completely, but it's still piloting. But the ability to see into what custom sees and sees funny little errors like that could really put your company on the spot, right? If you have the wrong manufacturer ID listed and they end up being an entity or something, and it's all because the broker picked the wrong mid or the address information was just slightly off. I've seen it all happen. I mean, I've seen customs point that out and be like, "Who's this company? They're your number one supplier." Who is that company? I don't know them. I mean, that stuff happens, and the ACE account is going to let you see inside of that.
And that's all by just charting your data in ACE?
It's just by running basic reports that are already in the system. Now they're all adjustable. You can add and take away so many data elements to make them custom. You can schedule them for yourself. You can save them in the system so the rest of your team can take a look at them. I think those are huge lifts that happen because you can have a report you run, but what if you're gone? What if you take a vacation? Someone needs to see something. You can set up
Okay.
all of your reports in your general share with your only with your other employees that are in ACE. And now everybody has that same format. It's consistency. It's being able to take a look at what data is in there.
So it seems like you've definitely seen cases where companies discover errors or a misclassification, right? By
Yeah.
doing this for the first time, where they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh my god, I wish I would have done this sooner." Have you seen that before?
Yeah, and I've seen them look at what has been filed on their behalf and have them say, "Wait a minute, like, wait, that's not what our product is. This is what my list says." And it turns out it's something silly, like there's an old broker line list that's been uploaded into their systems, and they don't realize that it's pulling that data instead of the data from the documents or instead of the most up-to-date data that you have from your ERP system. That stale data can really make a mess in your ACE data if you're not realizing it's transmitted. If you're never looking at ACE and you just say, it's my broker's job, I don't look at this, they do it, I don't know what that is, then you are missing those opportunities that you could be putting yourself at you're giving yourself a digital record that's not true. So let's just for a minute think, okay, I haven't been monitoring my brokers. I have this one core broker, and then I've got two or three others that we barely move stuff with sometimes, right? It's those extra brokers that you don't really manage or think about that could be filing entries that you don't even know exist. Your product gets there and no one complains, right? No problem. Until they've systemically reported an incorrect tariff and you've never looked over it. You've never checked to make sure it was right.
Yeah.
Then you have a change in the tariff provisions and you say, "Oh, I'm going to go ahead and tariff engineer and I'm going to change how I classify something and build it differently so it falls in a different spot so I can get a better tariff rate." But you don't realize because you never looked at your ACE data that you've actually been filing something completely different for a very long time. All of a sudden, you're introducing a brand new record to customs and that becomes an anomaly. And anomalies are what ACE data is the best for, is that if you know what truth is, within your system, using ACE data and knowing how to manipulate that against your truth will show you everything you need to know. And then you're sort of working by exception instead of worrying that maybe, something's just been put on autopilot or you're piling through papers. A lot of that can be done right directly through free ACE reports. So great resource.
And I want to touch on that because you were saying that ACE basically tells a story, right? And I feel like if you're telling a story, you can visualize things, right? When someone tells you a story, you're visualizing it, you're understanding it, and the deeper it goes into the story, the more you visualize it, which is basically you're saying ACE is doing for you. So what is the best way for teams to start having that visualization of their ACE data without needing to be these data scientists? Because I hear a lot of people struggle with ACE and not understanding and not really getting into the entries. How do you have that visualization? Oh my goodness, visualization. What is happening? Okay, guys, this is my second language. Okay, I have to just mention that one more time. Okay, I'm over it. Yeah, visualization. Okay, we're
Nice.
done here. There you go. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think when we start thinking about ACE as the scary place where all this stuff happens and you have to be a magician to take the data out of it to understand it, that's just simply not true. If you can work with a spreadsheet in Excel, you can work with ACE because unfortunately, the data comes out of the system in CSV or Excel files. So it's accessible to everybody, which is a huge bonus. It isn't the most technical, so it does have its limitations. If you wanna be a data scientist and do all these magical things, yes, you might wanna use that data in a different system to really flex. But if you're the average person in trade who is buried in things, the last thing you want is to have to learn new ways to, like, magically make something work. If you have the data in Excel, there are many ways that you can use basic functions to compare the data. I think the number one way to tell the story that I look for and the way I help people like kind of digest this is you're looking for uniqueness. And if you don't have unique, you make unique out of the data points. And so that's something that I really push is that you're going to know your business better than anyone else. You know what two things when together are a unique thing for a record that you could check for. And then you just use that basic, right? That basic understanding of your business and what truth is to take a look at those same data uniqueness in your ACE reports every week. And all of a sudden, those little tiny nuances start popping out for you. They start
What
saying,
would be a uniqueness? I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to cut
a
in.
unique.
What?
So things like a combination between the manufacturer that you know makes a product and the tariff classification. If you know that everything that you move through a particular supplier is only this classification, only this country of origin, or whatever it is, now let's throw in trade remedies and the million tariff stacking, right? If you know that you have a particular product that has a nuance where it requires a certain code, a 99 code that gives it an exemption to, reciprocal tariffs or whatever, you can take a look at those nuances and look at what you know is truth. This supplier is always this and it always has this. If
Yeah.
you bring those things together and you look at the data, you can tell immediately if something's wrong. If it's not been entered correctly, it's going to pop up for you. Using Excel to sort of do the heavy lift, using pivot tables within Excel to do the heavy lift, using slicers that allow you to say, please show me this. You need to digest that data in a way that's easy to view. You can't just look at piles. I'm not talking at looking and just searching for something or filtering for something. I'm saying create that view that you know is truth and then make the system show you where it's not true, where that exception falls, and it's brilliance. It sounds complicated, but really when you start thinking about your business and you start pinpointing those uniqueness, you can look for it in the trade data and you don't need any fancy software to do that. Just ACE, just Excel.
Okay. Just
Yeah,
a just
just ACE. I
people
know, smart
have in
kid.
their heads like just ace. Yeah, Michelle. Thank you for that one. Well, let's talk about automating audits based on exceptions because you've shared that. So let's talk about automation because this part kind of blew my mind a little bit. I mean, if I can call that right. So you compare the manual auditing to finding a needle in a haystack, which how do you do that? But exception based audits flip that narrative. So is that what you were talking about right now?
Yeah, yeah, it's absolutely the case. So, because when we do audits as trade professionals, it's like the worst part of our job. At least it was always for me when I worked at the desk. I hated it. You pull your audit, you're looking at a certain sampling to make sure you're catching everything. And you're really looking through messy documents, really yucky stuff, like going through and saying, why isn't this comparable? What am I looking for? Where's this? Where's that? The whole time. And when you decide to use ACE reporting to do those exception audits, what you're doing is making the system tell you exactly what files don't look right to you. You still go and look at paper, don't get me wrong. That's part of our due diligence. We can't just go by data and go with it because there are too many anomalies and too many factors. Humans can be the most systemic issue you've ever seen in data, which makes me laugh because you think, oh, the system must be broken. I'm like, no, you just have a very consistent human who's doing the wrong thing every single time. And so that can be maddening. But what auditing with an exception base using your ACE data gives you live data that's going through your broker, right? The data gets entered, however it gets there electronically, you still have to audit that. Just because you have EDI doesn't mean you can just walk away. Someone who's initiating that could be making those little mistakes. So if you have the data go through the system, it makes it to ACE, the broker's filed the entry. When you go back to check what's true using those unique identifiers that you've created, those points that are going to tell you the story, once you see that, you're like, "Oh, here we go. This entry, this entry, this entry. These are the ones I need to look at." The minute you identify whether that anomaly is true or correct, true or nope, this is a false positive. Those give you points that you then further take to say, why did this come up as a false positive? What about my uniqueness didn't work in this case? And you fix it. You fix the logic. You straighten it out until you have the right combination that takes out those false positives. Now, let's say it is an error. Your broker made an error, your supplier made an error on the documents. It's not about pointing fingers, it's about pointing it out. It's like saying, there is an error. That's it. Take the blame out of it. How do we fix it? You can
Yeah.
then take those documents, send a note to your broker and say, I need this entry corrected before final 7501. You've just avoided huge cost of and risk of having post summary that's having to correct the entry, having errors that could lead to requests for information, the CF28. Now you've got this little point taken care of, and you get to tune that up and tune that relationship with your broker to help you look for those things. This is really where the exceptions auditing is a support to your regular day. It's making sure when you go to pull those quarterly audits, whatever cadence you have, that you are seeing very few errors when you pull a physical audit without electronic data and you just say, do I have errors? Ideally, you're going to see a trend down where you
Yeah.
don't have. And that's the point of getting ahead of it with these programmatic or automated audits that you really control how that looks and you have to tune it. You can't leave it. It's not set and forget. Let's be honest there. So
I love how you said it's automated, but you still control it
you
because
control.
sometimes people, correlate automation with the loss of control.
Yeah.
And the fact that you just said that, I think gives the human a lot of power over automation, right? Because we see that a lot with AI nowadays. They say, AI is doing the job. No, but you still have to make sure that it's done correctly and you still have to apply it to whatever you're using it for because you can't just let it do its job, especially when it comes to trade, tariff classifications and as that. And especially now with A's, I do want to ask, where do you see the biggest struggle when it comes to ACE? So let's say they're applying all these steps and they're, finding their truths and finding where there's a false positive. Where do you see people that are already doing this? I'm stuck here or I have a problem? What kind of issues do you see?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to the things they don't control, which is the unknown source of like the problem, where you're just like,
Okay.
how did this even happen? Like, where did it happen? When did it start? I think there's a lot of unrest that happens when you first start opening your eyes to the data. You can kind of go, gosh, I'm going to run an audit. What am I going to find? I think right now,
Yeah.
some of the biggest apprehension and challenge is worried that you're going to uncover a total mess that you have to deal with. And if you're a licensed customs broker, you know this. You know you're required to say, I found this mess. It's terrible. And you don't have time for it right now. No one has time for messes we didn't know about. So when you open the floodgates of data, you will see things that you didn't want to see. And I think it's being prepared to stop and say, there is real ROI at looking at this now, adjusting, fixing, making a disclosure if you have to. It's not the end of the world. You'd better be to correct something, report it, have work with consultants or attorneys to make sure you're protecting yourself. Of course, don't just throw out a disclosure without putting all your thoughts together so that you're protecting your interest. But it's not the end of the world to find mistakes. It's actually best practice to find them, correct them, create a plan forward, and protect your business because you want to find it before customs does. And people just don't really realize that customs is getting way more technically sound than they ever have before. It used to be like, oh, they'll never see it. It's very rare, blah, blah, blah. Now you say AI. Well, they're working with AI now, they're using it for enforcement. So your data set is more important than ever to have a handle on it, to understand it, to start playing around with what you can. And it's free. So there's no excuse to like close your eyes. You don't want to close your eyes, but just proof your leadership. Let them know that we're going to do this because it's in our best interest to look at the data. We may discover errors. We may need to handle that with an appropriate action. Be prepared for that. But here's why we're not going to have errors like this again, because we're going to put this audit in place that's going to check every week before Final 7501, before it's material. And we're going to trend down on those errors, and we're going to show that we're a top-notch compliance program. So it's worth it. But that would be my biggest like hang up,
Yeah.
the thing I see the most. Yeah.
I don't like that, but I like that you're sharing it. How does ACE data, because I know it's far bigger than what we're even talking about, but how does it get you or your team a seat at the table, or how does it help? Because it seems like you get so much more information that you have before, and that information can be shared, right?
Yeah. So I want to switch tracks a little off imports because they're getting all the glory. So export control, having a handle on where your exports are going, where your filing is happening, those types of information right now with all of the focus on having affiliate, like the 50% rule. We've all heard about this coming out where there's a deep look at if you have business with a foreign entity who has 50% or more in an SDN or these restricted parties, that you're going to require a license to ship to them. It's kind of scary stuff. It's something that a lot of companies aren't used to dealing with, and to be honest, we have a lot of situations where exports are being filed by with you as the US principal party of interest and you don't even know it. Another forwarder might be filing it. If you don't use ACE data, you can't see that that's happening. It's happening behind the scenes for you. So some of the ways we've used like data in the export world to bring a seat at the table is to really show like your international team, your sales team, whomever it is, where your goods are actually landing. Because if you've got run a US PPI report that has the principal party of interest as your name, you can see every country that people have filed AES data to. And if you don't expect to see something on the radar, that's a big flag. So if you want to show your executive team that you have a handle on knowing what your export business looks like and that you know who's filing on your behalf, what's happening, because this 50% rule thing is hitting every level of the company. It's not just the trade compliance person's like issue. It's getting enough publicity out there that execs are starting to ask, well, how do I know we're not doing business? How do we know? What do we do? How do we know our clients? And being able to look at the data, the raw data, and then question the process because we could have an SOP that says we check all of this stuff. But what if? What if the data to customs and census tells another story? What if it says you shipped somewhere you didn't think you did? And now you're wondering, hey, do we even check those transactions? Did we know it was exporting? Did we know our name was on that export? Those are the types of things that tend to get executive level like oversight, and it's really appreciated. All of a sudden you become the get the lady who knows the reports. Go find her. Ask the questions because the last thing anyone wants to do is have their company's good name drug through the mud and in a real bad way just because they didn't realize how they show up in the story on the export side. The scary story.
The scary story. Yeah. So, for anyone listening right now and saying, wow, well, this sounds fantastic, I'm going to open an ACE account, but they're like, oh, actually, we don't even have a data department. This can be done by anyone, right? In the trade, that's in the trade department. Or do you have any clarification on who should do this? Or do you think it's simple enough where if they do not have an ACE account right now and they need to open one and go through the process, anyone should be able to do this?
So you have to be the company's trade account owner, has to be a high level person within the company to open the account with customs. So they're going to do that. And then they're going to assign people from within. So you can assign people in your company itself. You can give proxy access to your broker or a consultant or an attorney or someone else who you might need help with to get going on ACE and kind of see. Those are all options. But if you have someone in your team who's fairly good at Excel, but maybe they don't do data analysis, but they understand the basics of it and they have an interest in knowing more about it. ACE is set up in such a way that their canned reports really are pretty prescriptive. You go in, and if you just need the basics, they're there for you. You don't have to make it. You can just run it, you can put a date range in, and you can start to see where the data is good for you and where you're missing things. And once you're missing things, ACE has come a long way. There's all kinds of videos that help you fine tune and self learn. It's a huge asset because as they change things or add functionality, they add that documentation in and they allow you to kind of self learn and be able to really manipulate the report. So you don't need to be an expert. You do need to have a trade account owner at a high level of your company. You do need someone to give permission to the users. It's very important that you don't have people in the account that shouldn't be accessing the data. Like if from a just an employee security standpoint, you don't want to they'll have access to everything. So you wouldn't really want someone to just have full go at like downloading your business history.
Yeah.
But if it's a trustworthy person within your company who this is their role, there's no reason they can't start running those basic reports and finding out kind of what matches up for them, what starts telling that story for them.
Yeah. So to round this off, I kind of want to touch on the importance ACE has and that you should probably look at it before CVP does,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, for sure.
They're like, you found what? What we've been shipping to who? To what HTS codes is being used? Oh, I had no idea. Well, I guess I should look at it earlier next time. So probably not the best idea. But do you have any last comments on ACE or for companies that are barely starting with ACE?
Yeah,
Or that
just
are
think about
currently using ACE that are, where you can give a tip and say, hey, look at this a little bit more.
yeah, I think the tip is to start using it, right? Don't treat ACE as an archive that you just know is there and run reports because think about if you were to go back and say, I want to run the last 2 years of business, what does it look like for me? How much duty did I pay? Whatever. That's a lot better of a thing to do than to say, God, customs called. They said we did this wrong. And now I have to run a report that goes back 5 years, right? So think of it that way. You'd rather run the last 2 years of business and analyze things that you want to look at than be forced to go back 5 years and look for all of the garbage that is now been. It might have been before your time. Let's be honest. A lot of turnover has happened in trade compliance departments and it's another reason why having an ACE account tells you a story past maybe what you know about the company and gives you an opportunity to look at it and be proactive instead of reactive, where you've got a 5 year look back and a very stressful time to prove. what sort of exposure you might have. That's not the kind of seat at the table you want. You don't want to be called in because they want your CEO needs to know how much is this going to get us for type of thing. So that would be my call to action is just because it happened before you were here doesn't mean you can close your eyes. You need to look. And when you look, be ready to process what you see and be communicative with your leadership team so that you can be seen as a strategic person within the company instead of an alarmist. I think the administration's done enough to put us on the spotlight. Now we're kind of the cool kids. So, all those trade nerds, we get to be cool kids right now for a fleeting moment. I don't know if it's the kind of publicity I want, but at least people don't ask me what I do anymore. So it's good.
Yeah. So I think the last note is you should be the trade hero in this story and not the villain, maybe.
Not the villain.
Anywho, well, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I think this was a great discussion and so much about ACE. And obviously, if people have more questions, Michelle's information is down below. And there's so many resources out there that you can use that, Michelle has kind of meant or discussed. I also want to quickly, I like to sometimes do a little marketing spiel here. One of the Global Training Center's courses, the building blocks of international trade compliance, is coming up October 20th, which is kind of a whole overview on how trade works, import, export. If I wanted to really get into trade, that is the course I would want to take. Maybe I should do that actually. But you know what?
Yeah.
Listening to the Simply Trade podcast is also great. Listening to all these people, I feel like I could have a real trade position now. I'm like, pull me in, coach. I'll be the ACE coordinator. Don't worry. Just kidding. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I will be at ICPA conference and Michelle will be there too. So I'd happily discuss more on any topics you would like to hear. And I'm sure Michelle would happily discuss ACE with you guys. So thank you so much for listening. Again, like, subscribe, follow us, and talk to us if you have any questions or concerns. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next week. Bye.